Hi, and welcome to episode 12 of Office 365 Exposed. This year we're at Microsoft Ignite, and I'm joined by Tony Redmond and Greg Taylor. So in this episode, I'm the guy with the funny accent.
I don't know how to respond to that.
It's kind of funny. Everyone always says, the Americans always say to me, "You've got an accent," and my response is, "Well, so do you." But I mean,
It is true.
I think it's just where we are.
Yeah.
But in the interest of our listeners, I'm not going to put on my maximum Southern accent because then no one would be able to understand.
So, Greg,
Tony.
a new role.
Yes.
You're now the main man for Exchange, for marketing, for Exchange on-prem and Exchange online.
Yeah, I'm now the director of marketing, Exchange Server and Exchange Online.
That's a wonderful title.
It's causing me fun and games with my previous engineering team colleagues.
But I heard that there's a unique perk that comes with your job. You know, oftentimes when you're promoted into a director position, you get a key to the executive washroom or things like that. But I understand you have a lobster now.
Yes, I still haven't found the bathroom. No idea, but I did inherit the pleasure of the squeaky lobster.
That's good.
Kind of management. So
But beloved icon, so now you were the official lobster manager.
yeah,
That's
team
good to know.
lobster. Yeah, absolutely.
So we get back to that, I think, in a little
Yeah,
while.
sure.
Yes.
Let's move on because, let's not talk about lobsters. Please.
Why are you hungry?
Sounds fishy.
Oh, I am.
Okay.
I am.
Well, moving right along then.
Okay.
So we're recording this on the last day of Ignite. Big
We are.
conference, lots of things have happened, many people, every place is crowded and noisy and so on. Now's probably a good time to take stock and recap a little bit.
Yeah, good conference. I did think that the level of the technical sessions was a little bit less than last year.
Okay.
Okay, I thought that some of the theatre sessions were overpacked,
For sure.
for sure. So I was just wondering about the scheduling. How do you guys actually schedule a conference like this?
Good question. So, this is my first year as the track owner for the Exchange and the Outlook
Yeah.
session. So I've spoken at these events for a long number of years, or a good number of years. But this year and honestly, I'm delighted to be asked to do the Exchange and the Outlook track. So I've kind of been in it from the beginning.
Yep.
And it starts several months ago, the number of overall slots that get allocated, the division of them between the different teams, and huge areas, the Azure
Yeah.
and M365. You can imagine there is a fair bit of arm wrestling that goes on to
Yeah,
figure
yeah,
out
yeah.
from a marketing perspective, what stories we want to tell, and from an engineering perspective, what products we're launching. There's a real kind of push and pull. And then when we end up with our number of sessions, then as a track owner, I've got to then figure out, I've got so many 75, 45s and theatres, what do I need to cover? What do I want to cover? And how do I divide them up and cover all the things that we need to? The theatres, I've been amazed this year with the popularity of the theatres. Right? I mean,
200, 300 people just clustered around a stage.
And so what happens as well is that we kind of lock on the titles and abstracts, or
Yeah.
the titles a couple of months back. We don't publish the catalogue until probably about a month or so
Yeah,
ahead.
about mid-August.
And then
yeah.
people start adding but we don't schedule rooms at that stage.
Yes.
Then attendance, people who add it to their schedule kind of gives us a clue as to how popular these sessions are going to be. But so many people add sessions to the schedule that they never show up to.
Yep.
So it's kind of a gamble in many ways.
Always.
And so things like the Exchange session we did on Monday, we had 2,000 people added to the schedule, over 1,000 turned up.
Yep.
But you might also have sessions where 1,500 people added to the schedule and 200 turn up.
Yep.
And so
So how close to the actual day do you actually make changes to the rooms?
we changed the Exchange 2019 session and Julia and Jen Lou's calendaring
Calendaring,
session.
yeah.
We changed them the week before,
Okay.
which also then causes another knock-on effect, which is the rooms change and people can sometimes not pick up on the change because
Yeah.
they're not using the app.
Yeah.
So then the feedback is, you changed the room. Well, because I added it to my calendar 3 weeks ago, and
Yeah. But getting back to theatre sessions,
Yeah, theatres.
do you think they work when you've got such limited space on the expo floor?
I think the added challenge is that being on the expo floor, you've got all the background
All the
noise.
noise, yeah.
Yes.
And I mean, you know, I came by your theatre, and you must have had 250 people trying to.
Seven deep standing.
Against, I think you had said you had, 12 or 1,300 people who had registered interest through the tool.
Yeah, exactly.
Theatre, everyone adds theatres because they're kind of like fillers between other breakouts they want to do, right? Jeff Guillet's How to Enable MFA in 20 Minutes or Less, 1,500 people added it to their schedule. And 250 people turned up.
Yep.
But the theatres are, particularly with a small screen, I think that only the feedback I got was, you know, really only the people who are at the seating at the front have a chance of seeing what's on screen. So
I also think the audio was not great.
Wasn't it? Oh, no. Okay.
No, I've heard that several times.
You've got all this background noise. I mean, it's a tough problem.
It's a challenge.
Yeah, I think maybe with some of the most popular theatres, you know, we've got to figure out how to do them either as 45-minute breakouts or something next year and put them in a bigger room.
Well, maybe, but one of the attractions of the theater sessions is that they're bite-sized. I mean, Jeff could have talked for 75 or 45 about MFA. It's a 20-minute topic. You know, if he had rolled that into a broader security survey, you could make larger content out of it maybe. But I really like the ability to drop in, go to a session, learn something useful, and then go on and go do something else.
So with Jeff's, in particular, it was kind of interesting because so I came up with a name for his title and I asked him, would you do this? Because it just struck me that the title's got to be pretty clear. That we've always get feedback on. If you're not clear what it's going to be, you'll struggle to get an audience. But the popularity of the session just goes to show how you know, people really want to understand how to enable this, and we know how to do it, right? But
it's still amazing how people want to know the fundamentals, stuff that's been around for a while.
Brandon Culler in the Exchange Online Security one said only 12% of admin accounts have MFA enabled.
Which, by the way, is up from last year, because I remember Jeff making that point last year. He was talking about maybe 3% last year. So we've gone from 3 to 12%. So that's useful.
Which is great. Not enough.
No.
But it shows there's a demand for that kind of subject. And I agree. I think making it bite-sized hits the point, right?
So what about the announcement?
Which one was that?
What about the announcement? No, I'm just...
Let's
as a Microsoft person, you don't have to comment on the announcements because, you know, of course...
Yeah, fair point. I was going to ask Jeff or Greg about Azure IoT and, you know, the other things he's deeply qualified to comment on, but...
I've been a bit busy this week.
So
I haven't really seen...
Well, let's talk about the Office 365 announcements. What were the biggies?
Okay,
what do we think were the biggies?
So I'll lead off with Teams, right? The Teams, I felt like the Teams team handed everybody a 50-pound bag of wrapped chocolates. And by that I mean there were a lot of announcements. They were all individually tasty. I don't know that there were a lot of really blockbuster announcements. You know, last year the focus was on Teams calling and collaboration. This year, for example, we got the ability to add Yammer as a tab. Okay, some people very excited about that.
I know you got background blur as well.
Well, some of us got background blur, as you pointed out in your article.
I saw I was after foreground blur in yours as well, but you know, didn't know if there's an option to reverse that.
Did you like the way I blurred my interface?
Yeah. Very nice.
Actually, that is a good point to make people aware of, is that you only get background blur if you've got a recent PC.
Right.
And you know, something I have not heard anybody discuss or mention at all is whether or not support for blur is coming to any other client other than the Windows FAT client.
That's correct. I did hear some mention about the Mac, but I'm not sure.
Since the Mac is the machine where the cat occasionally turns on my webcam, you probably heard that story. I'm not going to repeat it here. I'm vitally interested in whether background blur is coming there. But, you know, in general, the Teams team had a lot of things to say.
Yeah. Including the ability for the first time to manage Teams through a GUI.
Yes.
Amazing progress after 2 years.
The Teams team are, there's a lot of work going on in that area.
That was kind of my broader point. They're delivering a lot of incremental updates very quickly, and that's a model. We really first saw that in our corner of the world, in the Office 365 world. Really, the first people to do that in a way that customers noticed was the Outlook mobile team, because every 2 weeks you'd see a new update in the store, just regular as clockwork. And the team's team is not quite on that cadence, but they're pretty close to it.
And I just want to give further applause to the Outlook team because they have finally announced that they're going to support shared mailboxes.
Fantastic.
Isn't that?
Well, as I believe somebody once said, I'll take that clap and give it back to the engineering team.
Right. Well, it's just surprising that it took so long for them to do it.
It's funny, the Outlook mobile team are. It was an acquisition of a company, right? The integration's complete. That team are really kind of interesting and unique. I work with my colleagues. I'm in the Outlook and Exchange product marketing team, so I work with that, and I know obviously Outlook's my client of choice, right?
Yeah.
Those guys, particularly in the mobile space, their cadence of change and updates and the way they listen and respond is startling from an old Microsoft perspective.
Yes, it is.
Do you think it affects the way you do work?
It does, I think. I think keeping up with the roadmap, telling customers what's coming, and stuff changes, right? It's software development, so you can put the problem is you always put a plan out for next year, and then or even a quarter away, and something happens and something changes. So it's a constantly evolving thing. One of the bits of feedback I got this week was, how do I keep up with the rate of change, and how do I know what's coming?
That comes out at every Ignite, to be fair.
And in a model a few years ago where it was a big release every 2-3 years, it was pretty easy. In the model that we're in today, it's really hard to keep up to date, and we do our best to keep the roadmap up to date. I learned this morning about a feature we're bringing, actually switching back to Exchange for a second, but public folders, we're doing some stuff there which hasn't really appeared on the roadmap, but we're bringing out because there are so many changes and if there's any kind of communication breakdown, the engineering team just keep moving.
So to that point, I've heard quite a lot of feedback from people say that they're a little bit disappointed with some of the quality that they've seen out of Office 365 this year.
Okay.
Things have slipped through that shouldn't have slipped through. I mean, for one example, is the cookie chaos that exists inside the admin centers. How many times do you go to an admin center and it says, "Oh, can't do that, cookie length exceeded"? I mean, it's crazy stuff at this stage, a couple of years into the product. But then I had a good chat on the stand with a couple of the guys who are actually working on this project.
On the admin piece.
Yeah, on the admin piece. And they said that it's really difficult because there are so many engineering teams that might throw a cookie into the mix. So when the time comes and they find out they have a problem, they have to go and debug the complete set of cookies and find out why a cookie was added, what it's doing there, is it actually needed, and can they get rid of it?
Benefit of hindsight, because we're all, it's amazing to think that things like mergers and acquisitions and divestitures and a unified administration experience weren't things that everyone sat down and thought from day one, we should build that, right? Yeah. Because, Office 365 began from a server under the desk in Building 36 as Exchange Labs and Exchange Online, and then SharePoint and Skype get added, and you have all these different admin portals. And at one point, I think I saw recently that there could be 16 different admin interfaces that admins might need to use.
At least.
And
or the 21 different ways you can create an Office 365 group.
Crazy, right? So, and that's just through kind of organic growth that the teams want to keep moving. You don't want to completely stop and say,
and I don't necessarily think that's bad, right? It's not bad that there's more than one way to accomplish a task. Now, what's bad is when there are different levels of functionality.
Yeah.
But maybe not even then, right? I mean, I like being able to go into PowerShell and do something where I have a lot of switches and options. If I have a tenant admin who's doing those things, maybe I don't want him to have as many options, for fear that something will get broken inadvertently.
Well, I know one of the teams, and I've been rather busy with my own track this week, but I don't know what they talked about this week, you tell me. But I know there's a team in Redmond and I know many of the people in it, who are building this improved, unified admin experience. The goal is to try and, bring the number of workload-specific UIs down to half a dozen or so, right? Yeah. So that the administration experience is more seamless and easier. That's the goal.
Yeah. And also to eliminate the problems like cookies and also inconsistent timeouts.
Right.
You get that across all sorts of admin. You turn around, oh, that damn thing is timed out, and I have to go and log in again.
Right.
And that happens with one console, and I go to another console, it might stay logged in for half a day.
Yeah.
But actually, you raise a point which I think is worth mentioning. I think a lot of Ignite this year was about Microsoft 365. Mm-hmm. Last year it was announced, and it reminded me a lot of the initial stages of Office 365. If you cast your mind back, 2011, June 2011, when Steve Ballmer launched Office 365, what we essentially had was 3 barely cloudified server apps that had very strong on-prem roots. If we look at it now, 7 years later, you can see that the depth of engineering effort has produced a much more integrated experience.
Sure.
And what I see this year is that there is now effort going on to breaking down the walls, breaking down the barriers, integrating the roadmaps between the different elements that now make up Microsoft 365.
Sure.
Is that fair comment?
Yeah, yes, I would agree. I mean, it's a massively complex engineering product when you historically built the products as kind of, standalone workloads, and then the idea was, let's build an administration and a commerce and a licensing platform across them. I think it's changed over the last few years. I would say there isn't really any such thing as the Exchange team anymore. Thinking of my own world, there really isn't an Exchange team.
You're a Substrate team now, aren't you?
There's the Substrate, right, that deal with the data storage layer and the graphs, pieces and all of that thing. And Outlook, the Outlook team own OA, Outlook on the web as a client, and Calendar.
Right.
So, and probably we historically would have thought, well, Calendar and these are Exchange features, right?
Yeah.
There really isn't a team like that anymore. And I think that's the direction that will make it better for us, because we're building features rather than products.
Well, that makes sense, right? I mean, you don't need to have a Yammer inbox and a Teams inbox and an inbox for your email and an inbox for alerts from the admin center and so on. Those are really all different use cases of the same mechanism of, I get a message from somewhere and I want to be able to search and sort and filter and display them and so on, right? So there's this whole level of Substrate functionality that different teams are now consuming where that wasn't the case in the past.
Search is the word, right? One of the words
yes.
But if you want to ultimately get to a point where people can search and find what they want, you've got to stop building silos of data. Or if you have silos of data because it's necessary for the app, a mailbox is a mailbox, a SharePoint site or a document library is a document library. But if you haven't figured out how to search consistently across it, then that's just painful. So
and a lot was made of the Microsoft search effort now.
Right. And I think because there's a huge investment, and it feels like we've been on this journey for quite a while, right?
Oh, no, we have been, right? There was FAST, and before that, there have been other initiatives that were supposed to be a moonshot to fix search.
Sure.
And I look forward to seeing the results from the search team because it's an example.
A play on words?
Well, not really, but let's hope that they're relevant results.
No, but it is fundamental. I mean, the thing is, if you put all this data into Office 365, and now we're getting to the stage where there is a very large amount, I was going to say a word there, but then I decided I couldn't be taped saying it. There's a very large amount of data in Office 365.
Yes, sure.
I mean, what's the largest single expanding archive? 1.5 terabytes, something like that?
There are only a handful of kind of funny. The unlimited archive and large mailboxes. When you look at the average across the number of mailboxes, they're complete outliers. There's a small number of complete outliers, but I think the more interesting piece is that of the data that's in there, the way it can be mined for BI purposes, right? So that that data we all know exists in our mailboxes for historical reasons allows you to build the graph and really have a better understanding of what's going on in the business. But there are a few mailboxes that.
I mean, we at Quadratech we routinely move petabytes of customer data out of archives into the service. It's not all. It doesn't tend to be concentrated in mailboxes. It's spread around. Greg, you said something interesting that makes me curious now. I wonder what happens if I go back and I import a bunch of 10-year-old mail into somebody's mailbox. Is there ever a case when that poisons the graph, and the graph will come back and tell me that I'm talking to, or I am talking to people that I don't actually.
One thing
talk
a little
to.
poison is your GDPR.
I don't even want to talk about.
Yeah,
GDPR.
I know, but I'm just to make the point.
I'm ready to just,
when people
drop the mic and walk off if we're going to talk
okay,
about that.
well, no, I mean I think it is an important thing that if you import 10-year-old mail into Office 365 that contains personal information, you better have a good business reason for keeping that information. Otherwise, you're going to hit those GDPR rocks.
Well, even before GDPR, right? It's always the case. You should never over-retain. Right?
Yep.
And some companies do it. Some companies, Intel, for example, is famous for having a very aggressive disposal policy so that they don't accidentally keep things longer than they need to.
Yep.
And GDPR is just one more reason why that's the case.
Yep.
So, Greg, let's pivot a little bit. I mean,
Sure.
you said the Exchange word a couple of times. Obviously, Exchange 2019, huge at the show. A lot of discussion of that. You said the session was very well attended.
It was.
All of the sessions were well attended, right?
Yeah, I'm actually
all
really,
the Exchange sessions.
Yeah, all the Exchange sessions have been really well attended. All the Outlook sessions too. So I've been really happy that we picked some good sessions. But yeah, I mean the Exchange session on Monday, I think I started with a comment. So on-prem's dead, right? You wouldn't think so by looking at 1,000 people. Standing in the room, sitting in the room, and being upset
blocking the
because they
fire
couldn't
exit.
get in the room.
Right.
Yeah, I've never been called a fire hazard before, but apparently we were a fire hazard. And I think that's cool. And it's interesting. I mean, is it just people who love Exchange and kind of want to come and hear what we're doing, or is it that they really want the next version of Exchange on-prem? Is it a combo of the two? I don't know what you guys think, but I mean, I was delighted to see so much interest in it, and the evals at the end of the session, the number of people who attended and responded, suggested to me pretty clearly that people kind of liked hearing what we had to say.
You're a victim of your own success in some ways. The team has been so consistent about adding high-value features to the service.
Yep.
Naturally, when you say there's going to be a new on-prem version, I would imagine for many people the first question is, great, which of the service goodies do I get on-prem now? Or what other... for business reasons, I have to stay on-prem, so what am I going to get that will make me glad about that? I heard from multiple people that was their big interest, is they wanted to see.
And going back to what we were saying a minute ago, we can't do a lot of the things in the service on-prem because we don't have the graph and we don't have all of the other things. So
you don't have SharePoint integration?
Well,
you don't have Teams?
No. And so I often do these executive briefing center meetings in Redmond, right? So companies bring over all their execs and we go do this lovely conference center building, which has the nicest toilets on campus. Got to tell you, the restrooms on campus in this building are
we'll cut that
sweet.
Office 365 bringing you the real news from Microsoft.
Yeah, we did say it is exposed.
But they are. It's lovely. I like going to that building. But I often draw this picture on a whiteboard for people when they talk about, the customer will ask, well, why can't we have these things on-prem?
Right.
And I kind of draw this 3-line kind of diagram and say, well, Exchange Online is this constantly moving development cycles, and so is SharePoint, and so is Teams, and so is Skype. And you can build features for the service when you know the position. You build it based on them all moving forward. In an on-premises world, they might not have the latest version of SharePoint, or they might have an old version of Skype, and so it's incredibly hard to build a feature that relies upon them having code that they might choose to upgrade at a different rate. Right. So there's one thing. But some of those features kind of don't make sense in an on-premises world.
I think you're also missing a point there in that it's sometimes also very difficult to integrate these products in a stable way, because you can do it inside the service, you can do it inside Office 365 because you know all the levers you're going to pull.
Right.
But in an on-premises deployment, as we found out when Exchange 2013 and SharePoint 2013 came out and tried to live together in perfect harmony, and there were only 54 different steps that you had to take to make this happen. It's just difficult. It is really difficult.
Different teams, in an organization running at a different speed. Same could be said of Exchange publishing, security, client access, remote access. Same could be said of storage. One of the benefits as well of Exchange years ago moving to a direct attached storage model was to get you away from the storage guy who would run at a different speed. If Exchange had a storage problem, you have to open a ticket with your storage guy. you know.
Well, not just that, right? I mean, if you think about on-prem, right, there are dependencies all the way from the top of the stack where Exchange sits, literally all the way down to the component level, where if you have two HBAs talking to the same SAN and they have slightly different firmware versions, you know, that's the kind of problem that people had to troubleshoot.
Yeah.
Now those dependencies are all behind the blue curtain. They're all Microsoft's problems when you consume the service.
Yes.
You may have other dependencies. For example, there are customers who've still got Outlook 2010 or 2013 on-prem and now have some dependencies or have some, you know, some things that they can't do because they have an old version. But that burden has shifted a little bit away from the customer admin and more toward the Microsoft infrastructure.
Absolutely, and you know, I think it's about managing a service, not servers, and we manage the servers in a pretty utilitarian kind of ruthless way. We have hundreds of thousands of servers.
So I saw a data point. Last year it was around 100,000 servers was the number you were talking about publicly, and this year I saw a slide that said 175,000. So it's pretty significant growth.
We buy a lot of servers.
You do.
They're just mailbox servers, by the way. That's just the mailbox server.
Then we have the edge infrastructure as well, where data's coming in and out. So it is a monstrous, ever-expanding. What's interesting as well, I think, it's a huge estate of machines. Obviously, automation's the only way you can possibly, and self-healing, right? So I always tell this story that, you know, when we moved to kind of a DevOps model, we used to have this the on-call system that exists. The phone would ring when a component would fail or an escalation would get raised. The phone would ring, and you'd have Rajesh Jha at the time, the Office 365 VP, and I was on call rotation, and you get his recorded voice basically saying, your stuff just broke, you should go fix that. And there is nothing that motivates a team more than that message. So they kind of went back to building software that understood their own common failure scenarios, and if they couldn't fix the failure scenario because it was, you know, a disk that failed or some kind of outside entity, we would at least recover gracefully and bring service back without having to wake somebody up.
Right.
You know, and we tell that story on the Tech Summit tour, as you probably know, of, you know, a network cable goes down because somebody's cut it in an undersea cable, and without human intervention, 70 racks of servers switch over to another data center in another country because we've detected network, you know, client latency has increased. And so automation takes care of it. It's the only way you can manage a service like that.
And sometimes automation fails. As we saw on September 4, with that outage in San Antonio, with lightning hit the server, hit the data center, and you had all the heat meltdown. And
you can be sure that a lot of pretty smart people are probably figuring out how to make sure that doesn't never happen again.
So there's a saying in the aviation world, particularly about carrier aviation, that the lessons of carrier aviation are all written in blood. Right? I mean, the reason that navies who have aircraft carriers do things the way they do is because when they didn't do it that way, people got killed. And you're essentially doing the same thing, only without so much of the killing. I mean, the team is always learning lessons about.
Can we move away from blood?
Yes,
I shared enough of it this morning. Let me ask you about a couple of points that came out of that session. You were very happy that there were 1,000 people.
Yes.
But there were some points that came out afterwards, after people had time to digest. And maybe you can hit them right on the head.
By all means.
Yep. Volume licensing. It's the only way to get for Exchange 2019. So what can you say about that for the small customer that doesn't do volume licensing?
Okay, so we heard the feedback loud and clear. We'll have we'll
you'll think about it.
We'll think about that as to what we can do. The intention was.
Yeah, that's what I was going to hope you were going to say. You're going to say that you're not trying to drive small on-premises customers away from Exchange.
No. Let's be very clear, right? I think small, medium businesses, we believe pretty strongly, and I dare you to try and question, they should be in the cloud if they can be in the cloud. It makes the most sense, right? They don't need to manage an IT infrastructure. They don't have the resources to manage an IT infrastructure. They are going to have, they can get on with their day jobs rather than manage IT.
Right, but for those that want to make that choice, you're not going to drive them away.
No. And if,
good clear message.
Exchange 2016 is in support through 2026, right? Exchange 2016 is a great product. People can continue to run that. Whatever we do with Exchange 2019 doesn't change that. And
it's going to be an even better product. But it's going to need 128 gig of memory or so, I hear, the recommendation.
So the minimum RAM requirement. Sure, absolutely.
I'm giving you all these softballs, Greg.
I know these are great because we can clarify some of these points because there's only so much you can talk about in the session, right? So, the basis for that, the increase in, which is long overdue. We've been running with kind of really low minimum RAM requirements on Exchange for a long time, and most of the customers, the enterprise customers I talk to, are kind of their standard SKU is a 256 gig server, and they haven't had too much of an issue with that in the past. So I had a customer once, hardware manufacturer, saying they wanted to put a terabyte of RAM in every Exchange server, although they made the RAM, which I guess probably made it considerably easier
and cheaper
to do. But the main reason for doing it though this time around is, so we're moving to Windows Server 2019. Server Core is the recommended approach because of the increased security that it gives us.
Yeah, and a lot of people are asking about that. It really makes that much difference to you?
Yeah, we think the overall security of the OS, the servicing model is better as well, less reboots. Right, so less interruption of service because you're running on Server Core. There's a lot less reboots when you do updates and installations.
Do you want to clarify for people what Server Core is? Because there might be some folks who are...
Sure, so Windows Server 2019 Server Core, there's no desktop experience. That's the alternate, Server Core versus desktop experience. There is a GUI, there is a UI, as contrary to what people might think, but when you boot up, you're in a command prompt type window. You launch PowerShell from it. There's no start button. There's no file explorer.
So Tony, welcome back VMS.
Yeah,
Dave
VMS.
Cutler. Dave Cutler is having his revenge.
Comes around, right?
Yeah.
My father-in-law used to work for IBM. Has great pleasure in telling me all the things that IBM were doing 30 years ago that we now do. But we've got rid of, there's no MMC-based stuff. For Exchange people, it's the MMC, which is the, kind of biggest probably takeaway. But management typically is remote PowerShell or from an admin workstation.
So there's no event viewer?
No, not locally, but you can fire up Event Viewer on your admin workstation and connect to the box, and
there you go.
Which, just apart from the surface area reduction, I don't like people RDPing into servers to do stuff, right? I mean, that's not the model that I want to see encouraged. So I'm glad to see Core support.
Do you want people, RDPing to an Exchange box and firing up a web browser, and it's just kind of, in the day and ages that we live in, it's risky.
The only thing I'll say to you, and this comes back to the 128 gig comment, and the small users. See, in some countries, what you regard as a very small user base might be regarded in that country as a very large user base. So they may say, hey, I've only got 3 Exchange servers, or I've only got 2 Exchange servers, and now you're telling me that I have to manage them all remotely, that they have got to have all this big memory, I'm going to have this operating system upgrade. Doesn't that sound like you're only doing Exchange for the big boys?
So on Monday, one of the first points I made was we built Exchange Server 2019 for the enterprise customers that tell us they want security, stability, and enterprise class features.
Yep.
And our strategy very much is, if people can't go to the cloud, but let's cut to the point of the memory, because really I think the sticking point seems to be that small customers can't put 128 gig of RAM in a box, which I
think it's in mine myself.
Which I don't think is true, right? Yep. I think in the economic, the economics of putting that much memory in a box, I don't think are what they would have been a few years ago, right? But let's clarify why we did it, or what's important about it. It came about because of the changes we made in .NET, garbage collection, scalability issues that we used to see. The changes that we made in .NET only really kick in once you have 100 gig on the box, with that large number of cores, 48 cores.
Okay.
Now, the reason we're calling it recommended is we're assuming if a customer's putting 48 cores in the box, what we need to do, I think, and having had the feedback, and we'll go back and think about this, is if you're not putting 48 cores in the box, if you're doing 20, 24 cores, how does that change things? Then, it does have an effect. There's this physics, right? This is, and software, this is how it works. But as to whether our guidance would change or not, we're not too sure. I'm still going to kind of go back and think about that with the team. But Exchange will work quite happily without 128 gig of RAM. It's just you won't get the benefit of all the changes we made in .NET for garbage collection. So scalability will become the problem.
Right, but for smaller customers, that may not be an issue.
Exactly.
And, Tony, I take a little bit of issue to your point. If you're a small customer, if you have 300, 400, 500 mailboxes, the expense of going out to buy a dedicated admin workstation or to add a dedicated management server is going to be small relative to the value you get from email. And if it's not, if that's a large expenditure for you, then you probably shouldn't be running your own infrastructure because it's too expensive.
Don't get me wrong. I mean, these customers are going to have to go out and buy new servers anyway.
Yeah, probably.
Right? They're going to buy new servers. They're going to put a new operating system on it. They're going to buy a new version,
drives.
solid-state drives, etc.
Optionally
for the Medicat, right? Okay, but solid-state drives aren't that expensive either now. So I mean, at the end of the day, if they're going to go, if they have decided that they need to stay on-prem, that they can't go in the cloud, then that's a pretty fundamental business and operational decision. Yeah. And if they have made that fundamental decision, then I think they're going to make the investment to get the right hardware. So what I guess you're seeing, and the reason why I brought this up, is that this is the immediate feedback that comes as people digest the news, and we're giving you the opportunity to say, no, it's okay, and explain it more, because I think that has always been the case with every version of Exchange.
Yeah, I mean, changes. We make changes in the product that. Think of this. I mean, the whole MCDB thing, the Metacast database, database thing that we've talked about. We are solving. Let me restart that thought. I'll tell you why. This is the interesting comment. So, when we talked about remove calendar events in the session, we got a round of applause.
Yes.
When we talked about we're adding SSD, cache-based capability to Exchange and have this dual storage model, nothing. Because remove calendar events is solving a problem people have today.
Yes.
So people are happy about that.
It's solving a problem people have had for 10 years. I mean, come on.
MCDB and the SSD piece is solving a problem they haven't yet had. Right? Because as disks are going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, the problem becomes more prevalent, and we're solving it now. So I think, genuinely believe, I think we're solving a problem that would be coming down the road.
Pivot on
don't
that
get
a
that
little
yet.
bit. And I'm going to use managed availability as my example.
Okay.
Managed availability solved a problem that Microsoft had in the service from a self-healing perspective.
Sure.
It caused issues for customers who wondered, why is the server doing this stuff behind my back?
Yeah.
I think MCDB is in the same vein. It's solving a problem Microsoft has now. I think the largest of enterprise customers will have that sooner than others. Many customers, I'm not convinced that.
And that's why we're making it optional, right? I mean, the MCDB technology kind of really is beneficial as the disk sizes that people put in the service increases. So 10 terabyte, 20 terabyte disks. You end up with this huge gob of data on a disk. Right?
Is that a technical term there, Greg?
But the latencies haven't really come down. So, that's a technical term. So, and so the problem might not be present now because you're using 4 terabyte disks, 5 terabyte disks, whatever they may be. But once the disk size increases, that's when this option, capability, will provide benefit, because Exchange can get the stuff it needs fastest, or for the user experience. And really, it's all about the user experience, right? Yeah. We want to give users a snappy, fast experience. So we keep the pieces of data and we duplicate the data. So, to be clear, right, the data that sits on the SSD, 5-6% of the total volume of the spinning disks, is a duplicate of the data. It's just I have a small subset of the same data. I can get to it quicker, and I provide a good user experience. That's what it's about. The challenge we're talking about, we're solving a problem down the road, is that you need to build the MCDB into the DAG layout, system layout when you architect the system.
But to be fair, you guys have been doing this for over a year now inside the service. So inside Office 365, this is how you run.
Yes.
And this has helped. And you've tuned it over the year. You've found out experiences.
And that experience and those learnings have been baked into what it is, which is why we don't. Exchange admins love to tinker.
Yes, we do.
We like to be able to tune, the thing. There are certain things that in the car analogy. I mean, under the hood now, there's not much you can tinker with, right? The motor, these days. And it's because you probably don't understand the complexity of what it's really doing. The development team who are running this in the service on hundreds of thousands of servers, they understand how this works and they've optimized it over time. They figure they've worked out the right sweet spot. If the SSDs are much larger, their calculations prove there's no benefit.
Yeah.
So we've tuned it to the point where we feel like it works pretty effectively, and we'll update that.
So
if it
what you're
changes.
saying is next year at Ignite 2019, we should expect to see a session on something, themed around performance optimization for MCDB. Is that a safe bet?
No, I'm saying
darn it.
No, I'm saying that
It'll be a theater session.
I'm saying that
500 people around it.
Everything you need to know in 20 minutes.
Yeah,
I'm saying that when we discover that we should tweak the performance or some of the parameters, we'll ship it in a CU. You'll install it, and you'll get the benefit of what we've proved in the service is the right configuration without having to do it yourself.
So hands off the controls.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
Works
so-
for me. So speaking of Ignite 2019,
Well, before we go to 2019, there are two other things I think that are worthwhile talking about, because I realize we don't have a lot of time.
Sure.
One was that the LinkedIn integration is finally rolling out. It's finally getting traction, which is another example of integration across the different parts of the Microsoft portfolio. But I just wonder how many customers are actually going to go to the bother.
I don't know. I don't know. The LinkedIn. So we had the LinkedIn team working with us on the Outlook booth this year. We had the Exchange and Outlook booth. The LinkedIn team were
Yeah, I
a part
saw
of the
that.
Outlook
I saw
booth.
an announcement that you're going to be able to call up LinkedIn information and Outlook meetings, meeting requests,
Yep.
and stuff like that.
well, like the social connector that we
Right,
had
the
some
old
years ago,
social
except
connector.
implemented properly.
Right. Securely, with user privacy taken
One
into account.
hopes.
One hopes.
Outlook is out. There's so much coming into the Outlook client. So the integration there and so many. The number of features the Outlook team, the calendar, and those team are building. And the Outlook mobile team as well. There's a huge.
I
number
heard
of
too that there's
benefits
going to
coming.
be an Outlook integration with Yammer.
Did you?
I did at the Yammer Vision session.
Did you? What did they say?
They said that Yammer is going to be the social layer for Office 365. It's going to get its claws into everything. And there was mentioned that you got the new Yammer control web part for SharePoint. You've got the Yammer tab for Teams, and then Morali, the GM, when he was talking about it, he said, "Oh yeah, we're even doing something with Outlook."
Excellent.
Yeah.
I look forward to seeing that session.
Oh,
Yeah, I was going to say, let's check back at Ignite 2019 and let's see
Yeah.
if the interest in Yammer has built or diminished after this year's focus on it. There's quite a bit of Yammer about it.
But it was quite a bit, but it's a new broom. I've been a big critic of Yammer over the years.
I hadn't noticed.
I have. Yes, I'll put my hand up and say yes. I've been a big critic. I think it was a wasted opportunity after Microsoft bought it. But there's a new broom, new guy in town, new sheriff in town or whatever, and it seems like there is an impetus on making Yammer a better Office 365 citizen. So we'll see. And maybe it will have an integration with Outlook. I can't think of what it would be, but there
there's
you
room
have
for
it.
improvement. I will say that if Yammer gets its own product-specific conference and Exchange and Outlook don't, I'll be very cross. I'm just going to throw that out there.
Duly noted.
Okay, very well. With that, I think it's about time to wrap up, gentlemen.
Yeah, we look forward. It's been a good conference. It's great to come here. Great to meet people again.
Terrific.
Old friends over the years.
Rumor has it we'll be back in Orlando next year.
I believe the rumor is that we're back in Orlando for many years, but that's just a rumor.
I've been told that.
It's a warm place, but it's been a great week. I've really enjoyed it this
Yeah.
week. Thanks to everyone for coming as well. It's been a great time.
And thank you for joining us, Greg.
Pleasure.
Pleasure. Always a pleasure to talk to you.
And to you.
All right, and that's it for episode 12 of Office 365 Exposed.